Welcome back to Rink Rap, presented by Forever Blueshirts. I'm Jim Cerny. Really pleased to be joined this week by longtime friend and former colleague at NHL.com. He's Dan Rosen. Dan, thanks for a few minutes, man.
I'm ready to go. I'm excited to be with you. It's a few minutes, so it's good, you know?
Oh, see, the key there to Dan's excitement is it's a few minutes with Cerny. It's always been this way. A few minutes in the press box, and then, Jim, I see somebody down there I got to go talk to.
Someone else.
Yeah. Somebody better than you.
Oh, no, come on.
Hey, I can live with it. You're here. I'm glad you're here. We're going to talk a little Rangers, talk a little trade deadline, all of that. In fact, we'll segue the two together.
There we go.
How important are these games before the Four Nations, not only for, the Rangers as part of that mediocre push to, within the Eastern Conference playoff standings, but for Chris Drury to make maybe that final decision on, am I going to do this or am I going to do that? How important is the stretch?
Well, I think it's a big stretch, no question about it. I actually kind of look at this season as there being almost two deadlines. One, a soft deadline, which is right at the start of the Four Nations or, right before it starts. And then obviously the hard deadline, which is the trade deadline on March 7th. So I think these are significant games. They're significant games for everybody around the league. But when you look at the Rangers in particular, they want to just stay in it, right? You don't want to be the team that drops out of this. You don't want to drop to where the Pittsburgh Penguins are. Because then you have to go on what the New York Islanders are doing now to just even get a chance to sniff at it, right? And how sustainable is that? It's, doesn't seem very sustainable. It seems like a hot streak to me. So you want to be able to stay in. They did not do well, obviously. The Colorado loss was a killer. Not because they lost the game, but they didn't even get a point out of the game. They were 15 seconds away. The Carolina game, that game's a 1-0 game. Vincent Trocheck has a breakaway in the last short-handed breakaway, doesn't shoot. Later explain why, but still doesn't shoot. 10 seconds later, the puck's in the back of your net on a great play by Mikko Rantanen. It's 2-0, and they weren't cooked then. They were cooked early in the third, but they don't get anything out of it. So now they got Boston and Vegas on a back-to-back, and these are significant. They got to get points. You got to stay in it. So I think it's big. Does it impact what Chris Drury's thinking? It could, if it goes really bad, right? Then it could. But if they stay in it, I think Chris Drury's thinking remains the same, which is they're going to look and they're going to be out there and they're going to be trying to improve this team for a stretch run to get into the playoffs. Because like all these other teams at the bottom, in the wild card race, really, and / third place in the Atlantic, they all see an opportunity.
Right. And I used the word mediocre before, and I'm not meaning any disrespect or anything for any teams that are out there. Everybody's, battling for spots. But even when the Rangers were 4-15-0, and we didn't know that things were going to turn around after the new year, we thought at some point it could, but we didn't know. I kept looking at the standings every day. I'm like, the Rangers are in last, but they're 5 points out of a playoff spot, six points at most, right? Out of playoff spot. I'm like, and that roster's much better than this team's roster and that team's roster and that team's roster ahead of them. I know that doesn't guarantee anything, but I for one, and you're nodding your head, maybe you agree, I never felt they were out of this thing.
No,
it's too good a team to be completely out of it, and it's too mediocre and a group of opposition, I think, to be completely out of it.
The only time I felt like they might be out of it, to be honest with you, was when Igor Shesterkin went down with his injury.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, how long is this going to be? Right? Because if this is going to be a month, well, I don't know that they sustain in this race. But it was 4 games. And he's come back almost like he did last year when he missed 3 games.
Yeah.
When he sat 3 games, didn't miss. He sat 3 games, right? Coming out of the All-Star break. And he came out great. And he is, listen, the last 2 games are what they are. And he wasn't terrific. They were okay, rare okay games for him in the last 2 games, but he's been by far and away, a difference maker for them since coming back. If the fact that they have him is, a reason enough alone to think, okay, they're not out of it, right? But then you're right. You look at the roster and you say to yourself, okay, they got a lot of talent. That talent's not performing from, November. I think that stretch of 4-15-0 went from about I think it was like November 21st through December 30th. I think that was the stretch. And nobody was performing. Nobody was playing well. It was like they were in a fog, just a total fog. It was weird. I had never seen a team like that. It was just, call it for whatever reasons you look at it, whether it was how they felt snubbed, they didn't like the way they were treated, their guys were treated, yada, yada. It doesn't matter. They were 4-15-0 and they looked like they were in a fog. They've come out of it. And when Igor went down, I was like, okay, this is the way it's just going to go. But since they've come back into a little bit, I never thought, then you look at it and say, well, this team's built to win now. So they're going to go out and try to win now. And they salvaged it with the 10-game point streak. So long answer there. When Igor went out, that's when I worried. That's when I worried. That's when I really worried. Obviously you're worried if you're a Ranger fan when you're 4-15-0 and you're playing in a fog, but you think it's going to continue when your top guy is out.
Absolutely. So you talk about the fog, and all I can think about, and you're right, it was up and down the entire lineup.
Yeah, it was weird.
I mean, the mistakes were mind-numbing, the lack of effort or seemingly lack of effort in game, mind-numbing stuff. The one guy where it seems to continue with right now, and he's at the top of that roster, is Mika Zibanejad. And I know, he's had points have come, and he's shown a little bit more life this month. He is not the same guy. He's not Mika Zibanejad. So the team's pulling out of this. He is not completely pulled out of this, at least in my opinion. I guess your thoughts on Mika, and what do you think's going on there?
Well, I'm actually writing about him, or like today.
And it's another assist for Cerny.
Perfect assist. I'm going to defend Mika here. All right. And I'm doing that in the story I'm writing about too. His last month has been pretty good. It really has. And I talked to him about it. He's felt a lot better about his game. Where it hasn't come along is the production. He's got 1 goal in his last 12 games. But you watch him play. He's playing with a lot more energy in the last month. He's skating better. He's looking. He's hunting. Right? That's back. The mistakes are way down.
There are still some pretty egregious ones, though.
There are some egregious ones, but I think it's more noticeable because you're looking for it. Right? So because a guy goes through 3 months the way he did, or 2.5 months the way he did, now you're looking for it. If he had a pretty good 2.5 months and he made a couple of egregious mistakes along the way, you would let it go, right? It's just something like you kind of let it go a little bit. But because of the way it was going for him, it becomes so much more noticeable. The one thing, though, that I think that really has made a difference in Zibanejad's game is the fact that he's now in a more defined shutdown type role. And it's Peter Laviolette scoffed at the notion of that being a shutdown role for Mika because they want him to be on the attack. They want him to be offensive. And I think he is at times with Riley Smith and Will Cooley. But he's gone up against Nathan McKinnon, Jack Eichel. There's Jack Hughes. There's been a number of guys here over the last 10 or 12 games that are high level players that Mika's gone up against. And those guys have not beaten the Rangers. Right? There's a reason for that. He's played well. He's played better. Let's put it that way. Okay. So the last part of it to come now for Zibanejad is the most important part, which is the production. But I'll be honest with you, Jim, I don't know if he's ever going to be the 39 goal scorer he was 2 years ago, or the 41 goal scorer he was when the league paused for COVID. He's got 9 goals this year. If Mika can get to 20 and play the role he's playing, that might be enough to help the Rangers really stay in this race. But his production has to increase. You look at it, though, he's getting opportunities. Look at the Columbus game, 2 breakaways in overtime he doesn't score on, right? There's the couple of games, too, where, like, the shots are there. He's getting really good looks, especially on the power play.
He misses the net like crazy.
Misses the net, right?
Right.
But also, on those power play shots, he misses the net. Chris Kreider is not in front of the net. And that, to me, is a bigger problem.
He's been off to the side.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Correct. He's off to the side. So, it's throwing things off a little bit. But, again, I want to defend Mika here because I think he's playing really hard minutes. And the production's got to come because they need it. They do. But he was a big reason they went on that 10-game point streak. Without his minutes and that role he's playing against some of these top guys, I don't know that they do that. So I got to give him a little bit of I'm gonna defend him a little bit.
All right, you can defend him. How about and I didn't want to go down this road, but because we're talking about defending guys and everything, we've had a major debate here between writers and people I talk with in the business, and certainly getting the fans' impact. There's this group that absolutely, and here we go. This is like the Hedel and Kakko things of years past.
Okay,
I just love Alexis Lafrenière, and there are others I like. I loved him. I don't love him as much anymore.
Yeah,
since and they all point to signing the contract with which I think is more. I don't think his game is or his production has gone down because he signed the contract. I think it's more coincidence, but doesn't seem to be quite the same player. Again, The production not quite there. So again, your thoughts on Alexis?
There has to be so much more to his game than he's showing right now. When you're playing with those two guys, in Panarin and Trocheck, you should be generating more. Like, you should have better chances. He had one right at the post against Carolina, didn't go in. Great save by Freddie Anderson, but those are few and far between for him, and that's alarming. I think it's alarming. I actually think it's far more. I think Alexis' game is more alarming than Mika's game, to be honest with you, because Mika at least is doing things that will help the team. It prevents top guys, right? I mean, he's doing a good job in that sense, and he's getting power play, and he's getting opportunities, getting chances, and creating a little bit of momentum off of that. Laf is not doing as much, and why is that? I really don't know. You would have hoped to see the step up in his game,
for sure,
from last year. Last year, you saw the step up in his game, right? Well, okay, now everybody took notice. That's when it gets harder, right? I mean, that's when it gets harder. And the really great ones, they step up to that challenge when it gets harder, and they get better. And it hasn't happened for him. And to me, that is the alarming thing about it. So I'm not ready to give up on him by any stretch of the imagination. I think he earned the contract that he got, to be honest with you, by his performance to that point and what the expectations were, and the fact his age and all that going forward. There needs to be more. There needs to be a greater level of maturity. I don't know if maturity is the right word to his game, that in the sense of you got to grow beyond the challenge that you're facing now. And that to me is where he's stuck right now.
So you talk about him earning that contract, and now, obviously it hasn't gone great since signing it. The other guy that's the restricted free agent, or, as Lafrenière was going to be a restricted free agent in the offseason with arbitration rights. The other guy that faces that is Keandre Miller, who has not signed yet. And I think the Rangers were testing the waters with him, in trade circles a little while ago. His game has settled down a little bit, but here's another guy. This is now 2 years of steep decline in production and really some woeful moments in his own end. So here's a guy that you thought was going to be a pillar. You were convinced, right? We're going to sign Miller. We're going to sign Lafrenière. They're going to be part of that core moving forward. If you're Chris Drury, this is a massive off-season decision to make on Keandre Miller. How do you think it plays out?
Well, I just asked the question of, did Keandre Miller earn a long-term contract, right?
Absolutely.
I
wouldn't be comfortable with it.
I don't know the leverage there on his end to get that long-term contract. So that's question number one. I don't know that it matters. I mean, that's the other part, right? So
right.
His game in the last month has been better. I think Will Borgen has really come in and done a really good job with Keandre Miller. And listen, one of the things Keandre Miller entices you. His size, his reach, his skating ability. It's so enticing. I want to see him be a little bit more physical. I also want to see him at times not skate the puck as deep into the offensive zone as he does, because I think he gets caught. It's happened a few times where he's skating it and it's enticing and you're looking at it, oh man, but then the next play is not there and now it's an odd man rush the other way. Now you got a forward covering for the defenseman the other way. How do you manage that, right? Because you want him to be able to do those type of things, but the next play's got to be there. And so I think there needs to be a little bit of restriction on that from him, his own brain, in his own mind, to be able to do that. I don't understand. I never understand why he always goes down to defend. Like he'll slide on the ice to defend sometimes. Yeah. And that I don't understand. But his minutes have gotten better with Will Borgen. I think when he was playing with Adam Fox, his minutes were pretty good too. The struggles were with Braden Schneider. The struggles were with Jacob Trouba. The big time struggles were with those guys. I think at the end of the day, you look at it and say, he can continue to get better, but he may just be a middle pair defenseman, right? But then you have to slot him that way on your cap, and you have to be, all of those things have to happen. The obvious question, the obvious next question is Ryan Lindgren's a pending UFA.
That's where I was headed.
I think they should trade Ryan Lindgren.
Yep.
Regardless if they're in a playoff race or not, I think they should trade him. Listen, you're going to get something of value back, and the reason being that a lot of teams who are in, look at the teams in the West, like they would love that, right? To get a guy who plays those types of minutes, and can plays that type of game.
Right. So, and again, not to cut you off, but especially as a rental, where you don't have to worry about how he ages down the road.
Correct. And the Rangers have to worry about how he ages, which is why I don't see them signing him. So even if they're in a playoff chase, I think that the Rangers should trade him, because you can keep him as your own rental, and that's fine. But I don't know. I think you want to get something, because I don't think the Rangers are a Stanley Cup winner this year. I just don't see it. So anyway, and Lindgren's game's gotten better over the last month too. But does Miller then go play with Fox? Right. And if Miller plays with Fox, does that increase his value overall? Not in a trade, I mean in a contract. Okay. So there's a lot of questions there, and I think this next month is going to be really interesting to see how these things get ironed out. And it may not be this season, because they may not trade Ryan Lindgren, depending on where they are come the trade deadline. But Keandre Miller is a guy that entices me, he fascinates me, and he angers me all at the same time.
And if he does that to you, imagine what he does to Peter Laviolette and Chris Drury. And
and I'm not a fan, but you see it, man. I mean, oh my goodness, you see it. There's a lot there. And I don't think if you're the Rangers, you want to say, nah, that's not going to happen with, we're going to trade. He could go somewhere else and you'd be regretting that trade for a long time.
Right. And for the Rangers, it's a roll of the dice either way. Let's say that they're all in for one reason or another. They're all in. We're going to give them the contract, the long-term contract, which means, it's going to be pretty hefty price-wise as well. And then if he continues to flatline, like I think he's flatlined here these last couple seasons, you're stuck. It was a terrible decision.
Correct.
Then the flip side is, no, we envisioned, we liked what he did with Fox when he played with Fox this season. What if he's the every game guy with Fox?
Right.
Let's let's go shorter term. Let's put him in that role. We'll see what happens. And then, we're walking him into unrestricted free agency because it's not a long-term contract. And now Miller's game is taken off because he's playing with Fox, and it's going to cost you a lot more money, or you could just lose him, as a free agent. I mean, this is why we don't get paid like general manager.
Yeah, I can't make this decision. I'm glad I don't have to. Right?
No way.
No, the thing that I will say this, I don't know that he's done enough to earn the long-term contract. Everything about his game screams enticing. Everything about his game screams he's a top pair defenseman. About his look, he just hasn't
until you watch every game.
Until you watch him every game, he just hasn't played like it on a consistent basis. And I remember there was a game, I can't remember the game. It might have been Dallas. I don't remember, where the puck is low in the zone late in the game and it's a close game, or you're defending a 1-goal lead. I think they were defending a 1-goal lead. I think it was a Dallas game. And he was at the top of the circle. You're defending a 1-goal lead. The puck is in your defensive zone. You're the defenseman, and he was at the top of the left circle. Not exactly where you want to be, right? And the same shift, he had taken the puck deep too.
Yeah.
And again, they got caught, right? But again, I sit here and I look at Keandre Miller and I'm just like, man, there's so much there, right? So, and it's a tough position too. Like, he's played a lot of minutes, he's played a lot of games, but sometimes guys don't come into it until they're 25 or 26 years old either.
Yeah, good point. Listen, I don't want to tie you up for too long. Just real quickly, let's hop into, heading into March 7th, NHL Trade Deadline. Quick thought, if we can keep it to quick, on JT Miller, because I'll be honest, if I'm the Rangers, I can argue this one both ways. Having been around JT Miller a lot when he was coming up, and admitting, I know he's older. I know he's a better player now than he was then. I know he's more mature human being and everything, but he is a difficult guy, difficult personality. And that's not just with, we're in the media. I mean, in the room, he was always a difficult guy. Now he's having massive problems in Vancouver with Pettersson. And I'm not saying he's in the wrong there, because we don't know what the heck's going on. But I think, before the Rangers do a plunge here, man, do you have to do your homework and a deep dive on JT Miller. And then that's a 1A, but then 1B would be, if not JT, then what do you envision?
Well, yeah, I mean, the JT Miller thing is really interesting because everything you said is spot on. But he's so good, right? Yep. He's so talented. He can do so many different things for this team. He brings a snarl that this team needs. He brings that type of bite, that competitiveness, that all of those things. Plus, he's a 100-point player, wins a lot of faceoffs, can play winger, center, power. I mean, there's so many different things that he can do. I understand he's 31 years old. So the question is, are you getting the best of JT Miller, or is the best of JT Miller already has been played out in Vancouver already, right? So tough decision. I don't think they're going to get him it's not an apples to apples trade, right? Like, if you get him, so you'd be able to do something here that is not going to, I don't think the Canucks have much leverage, so in this, they're going to have to give up something, no question about it. But I think the Rangers could do this if it's still available for them without the return going back and everybody going, what is that? No way. Right. I don't see that happening, but you're right. You got to do a deep dive. You got to figure it out. I will say this. He could be a difficult guy. I don't think that's a problem. I think this room needs a little bit of that. It needs a little bit of change, It needs a little bit of a guy, a little bit of a prick coming in, and saying like it is. And he's earned that right with his career. He's been there before. Guys know him a little bit. It's a real interesting one. If not JT, well, that's a really good question. Because if not JT Miller, well, what about Elias Pettersson, right? Because right, I mean, like, honestly, there is that possibility. Obviously, with Vancouver throwing things around, it's going to cost you a lot more though to get Elias Pettersson. Yeah. And there is the same type of question that JT that comes with JT. Is he a difficult teammate? Remember, these two are going at it together, right? So who's at fault? Who's more difficult? Those are all questions. But if not JT, or short of Pettersson, I don't know that there's a trade out there that they can make that can be as impactful as that in the season before March 7th. I think you then have to wait till the offseason and see how things play out. I mean, if they could be in the running for Mikko Rantanen, I would want that second, right?
Second, absolutely.
So, and that might also be a reason why you don't trade for JT, because you want to be in the running for Mikko Rantanen. If you trade for Miller, are you in the running for Mikko Rantanen? I don't know.
Yep. And that's something I've talked a lot about on the podcast is, what's the short-term plan for Chris Drury? But what's the bigger long-term plan? You shed Trouba's salary, they're in a much better salary cap spot than they have been. Still got to figure out Miller, but you have certainty now with Igor and Lafrenière, and you have room, and plus the cap's going up reportedly significantly next year. I mean, they could really be in a nice spot if they're willing to, hey, let's tweak here and there, and let's hope for the best. Let's hope Igor gets on a heater in the playoffs and takes us on a run. But if not, look at free agency July 1. I think they're going to be big players July 1.
I think they will be too, and I think the Washington Capitals are the example that was set. Made the playoffs last year, but they weren't any good, and then they were banged up. The Rangers smoked them. They got them out in 4 games. They retooled. They changed over a third of their roster in the offseason, and now they're in the hunt for the President's Trophy. So to me, you can do it fast. It can go fast if you make the right moves.
Good stuff. So we'll be looking forward to the article that I teed you up on. That's coming on Mika Zibanejad over at NHL.com. Dan Rosen, thanks for a few minutes. Great catching up today.
All right. You too, Jim. Take care.